In the summer of 1960, under the bright and humid skies of Central Africa, one man's voice rose above the crowd at a historic ceremony. While diplomats and dignitaries were expecting polite gratitude, what they heard instead was a fearless challenge, a call for dignity and true independence. This voice belonged to Patrice Lumumba, Congo's first democratically elected prime minister, who dared to shatter the script of polite submission to former colonial powers. He was not content with mere symbols of freedom. He demanded the real thing. Patrice Emery Lumumba was born in 1925 in the Kasai region of what was then the Belgian Congo, a colony ruthlessly exploited for rubber, ivory, and minerals. Under Belgian rule, the Congolese people were treated as second-class citizens in their own land. Education was limited, healthcare was scarce, and opportunities for Africans to rise into leadership positions were nearly non-existent. Yet, Lumumba's sharp mind and unyielding spirit helped him stand out. He began his working life as a postal clerk, a modest position, but one that gave him a window into the way society was structured, how wealth and opportunity were distributed, and how communication flowed between officials and ordinary people. As he rose in the ranks of the postal service and later took on sales jobs, Lumumba spent countless hours reading, discussing, and learning. He absorbed the ideas of other African leaders fighting for independence, studied the successes and failures of newly free countries, and grew confident that the Congo could shape its own destiny. He joined political movements, wrote articles advocating equality, and built up a reputation as a gifted orator who could speak directly to the hearts of ordinary Congolese. By the mid-1950s, a wave of independence movements was washing over Africa. European powers, weakened by 2 world wars and facing growing international pressure, began to loosen their grip, though often reluctantly. In the Congo, Belgium tried to prepare a controlled transition that would keep economic power and influence in Belgian hands. But Congolese nationalists, including Lumumba, demanded real sovereignty. They wanted to make decisions for themselves about their resources, their schools, their infrastructure, their future. Lumumba helped form the Congolese National Movement, also known as the MNC, a party that sought unity in a country deeply divided by regional, ethnic, and linguistic differences. Under Belgian rule, these divisions had been encouraged, making it easier to control the population. Lumumba's approach stood apart. He believed that only by uniting could the Congolese break free from the cycle of exploitation. On June 30th, 1960, Belgium granted the Congo its independence. The ceremony, attended by King Baudouin of Belgium, took place in Leopoldville, now Kinshasa. The king's speech praised Belgium's civilizing mission, implying that the Congolese should be grateful for having been guided toward freedom. Many expected polite applause. Instead, Lumumba stepped forward and delivered one of the most shocking addresses in post-colonial history. He refused to whitewash the brutal past, the forced labor, the beaten backs, the stolen wealth. He insisted that the Congolese people had earned their freedom themselves, through suffering and courage, not through Belgian generosity. His words electrified the crowd and stunned the European guests. Independence would not be a quiet handover. It would be a reclamation of dignity and self-respect. Lumumba's plan for the Congo were ambitious but straightforward. He wanted to control the nation's abundant resources: copper, cobalt, uranium, diamonds, for the benefit of its own people. He understood that political independence was meaningless without economic independence. Schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects were at the top of his agenda. He aimed to give Congolese citizens the skills and education they needed to run their own affairs. He wanted to restore pride by promoting local languages, culture, and art, breaking the mental chains that had kept Africans feeling inferior. He also believed that all ethnic groups in this vast nation, over 200 different ethnic communities, could find common ground in the shared goal of rebuilding their homeland. This idealism was not naive. It was strategic. A united Congo stood a better chance of resisting outside interference. But to others, both at home and abroad, his unity and independence message was alarming. To those who had grown rich under colonialism, Lumumba's stance threatened their profits. To Western governments locked in the Cold War, his willingness to speak with the Soviet Union or any power that respected Congo's autonomy marked him as potentially dangerous. The 1960s were tense. The United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in a global struggle for influence. Newly independent nations like the Congo were pawns on the chessboard of international politics. The Congo's wealth of minerals, particularly uranium, which had been used in the atomic bombs of World War II, was too valuable to be left entirely in African hands, at least in the eyes of foreign powers. While Lumumba insisted on full independence, the Belgians secretly backed secessionist movements in resource-rich regions like Katanga. Western intelligence agencies, including the CIA, feared that if Lumumba turned to the Soviet Union for support, Congo might become another domino in the spread of communism. Instead of respecting Congo's independence, they plotted ways to remove or neutralize Lumumba, who refused to play ball. Arrested and humiliated, Lumumba was flown to Katanga, a breakaway state sponsored by Belgian interests. There, in January 1961, he was brutally killed by a firing squad. The Belgians and their local allies tried to cover it up, but the truth emerged. His death was not an accident, nor the act of a few rogue soldiers. It was a calculated move to end a leader who was too independent, too honest, and too committed to his people's freedom. The Congo quickly fell into chaos. Without Lumumba's guiding hand, the country experienced decades of dictatorship under Mobutu, who renamed the country Zaire, looted its treasury, and crushed political opposition. The Congo, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, has struggled with conflict and corruption ever since. While the country eventually shook off Mobutu's rule, it never fully recovered the spirit of hope that Lumumba tried to kindle. Beyond his fiery speeches, Lumumba's life held small but meaningful details that reveal his character. Before taking office, he traveled abroad to learn from other nations. He read political theory and economic plans late into the night. He held long discussions with advisors about how to create textbooks that taught Congolese history from an African perspective, not a European one. He respected women's contributions and believed that without including all members of society, true freedom could never be achieved. He also recognized the power of symbols. Lumumba supported moves to rename streets, towns, and institutions that had carried Belgian names, replacing them with Congolese heroes and cultural icons. He understood that changing minds and restoring pride in one's identity was as important as building roads or writing new laws. Despite his short time in power, just a few months, Lumumba's legacy lives on. Across Africa, schools, roads, and buildings bear his name. Young activists still quote his speeches when calling for fair trade deals, honest leadership, and an end to foreign meddling. Scholars and journalists continue to uncover documents that show the full extent of the international conspiracy against him. Artists paint his portrait as a symbol of unbreakable spirit. Poets write verses mourning his loss, and musicians sing songs praising his vision. Today, as African nations still grapple with economic pressures, unfair contracts, and political interference from abroad, Lumumba's story is a reminder. Political independence can be hollow if a country cannot control its own destiny. True freedom means education, healthcare, fair wages, and the pride of a people who know their worth. It means saying no to deals that only benefit a tiny elite or foreign companies. It means believing that African minds, African labor, and African hearts can shape a future that serves everyone, not just a powerful few. Patrice Lumumba's life ended far too soon, but the ideals he fought for remain relevant. He reminds us that courage and honesty can change the world, even if those who stand to lose power and profit fight back with all their might. His story belongs not only to the Congo or to Africa, but to anyone who believes that freedom is worth defending, fiercely and honestly, no matter the cost. If Lumumba's life and legacy have touched you today, consider joining us on this journey. Our channel is dedicated to telling the stories of remarkable individuals who made a real difference. We uncover the truths behind their struggles and triumphs, showing how one person's bravery can inspire millions. Subscribe, share this video, and help us keep these stories alive. Together, by learning from leaders like Lumumba, we can understand our own roles in building a fairer, more just world, one where voices like his can never again be silenced.